I'm about to leave the house, but I'm laying down for a second. It's a rainy Sunday here in New Hampshire. I don't know what the date is. It's 22nd, 23rd of April 2023. But I was just sitting here meditating for a little bit. That's why I'm filming in bed. And I was thinking about all the stuff that used to be decentralized that is now um, standardized and or governmentized or controlled by the government. And I was even thinking about language and writing and how strange the English language is and how we've created some of these words. So words get created and put into the zeitgeist of society. Excuse me. I was just in a deep meditation, so I'm still kind of coming back out. So picture before the printing press or before like standardized writing and stuff when people would speak and write, and not everybody was writing, but for the most part, everybody was speaking. So you could survive with language without being able to read or write, and for a large portion of time, that was the case. And then the scholars and elites, for the most part, obviously there's always exceptions to the rule, could read and write. And then the printing press allowed for people to own books at a much faster rate and read. But prior to that, so imagine you're writing, before language, when language was more decentralized. And I was kind of thinking about this within coding. So people code now, and they like to use different coding styles to code. And I don't know, it's just interesting. Like, feet spelled F-E-E-T. It used to be pronounced fet or feet. It's read as feet. But like we all know that you can we have spell check now. And some people are really I don't really want to say anal, but because they're very meticulous when it comes to proper spelling, and I like to try to spell properly. In fact, I think I have a little bit of embarrassment when I don't know how to spell something, even though there's so many words. It's just confusing. I for E, except after C, but then other times just randomly it isn't. And, you've probably seen old bits like Gallagher does a really good bit with boot and foot. It's foot, F-O-O-T. So it must be boot, B-O-O-T. No, it's boot, B-O-O-T. And and then numb is M-U. Tomb is T-O-M-B. Womb, W-O-M-B. Bomb, B-O-M-B. And goes through the thing. And then, so this N-U-M-B is nom. Anyways, you can go look it up. But I was just thinking about how things can get standardized in a decentralized manner. The government always swoops in and is like, well, without us, how would you learn this? And how would you do this? And how would you do this? But if we get away from language for a little bit and you move over to mathematics, it's all right. I ate lunch prior to meditating, so maybe I have lunch in my beard. But the government's always here trying to say like, oh, without us, how would you have this, that, and the other thing? Excuse me. Yeah, by accident. My teeth knocked out. And certain things will always come about. So mathematics is not a program, it's not a class. It's not something that you learn. This is what's really scary about Common Core math and stuff. Is mathematics is something that exists in the realm of reality and objective truth. And then we've created a universal language to express what we discover in science. And parts of it are clunky and easy. So, like when you first learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's no true one. There's always a variation of difference between two things. Breaking it down to the atomic level is the closest that you're going to get to exact similarity, where you're always going to have water is going to be H2O. But when you go to look at those particular molecules and they're very similar, the weights could be somewhat off, but they're going to be pretty close. It's easier to think about extrapolating it upwards, where if I sent you to the store and I said, get me 3 oranges, and you came back with three round oranges that were orange, for most people, they'd be like, okay, thank you so much. Then if there were 3 small oranges, somebody might be like, dude, what's this? These aren't even oranges. They're almost the size of tangerines. I was expecting larger oranges. So there'd be a size discrepancy there, but it's still quantifiable as 3. But then if you take 2 visual oranges to the eye, they look visually identical, and you put them on a scale, the oranges are going to weigh different things. And then if you check the wave of the actual color, the color is going to be different. If you check the number of seeds, it'll probably have different seeds. If you check the sugar fructose contents, it's probably going to have different fructose between the two. But we can still quantify each as 1, even though they're different. It's 1 and 1 orange makes 2 oranges. So as you scale outward, that you can have more room for play. And it's if you scale inward to be precise, you have to have less room for play. And so even when you're like buying like a scale or a measuring implement from a company that's trying to standardize everything with the surroundings, because there's no like, if you're selling a measuring tape and you said, yeah, here at Amco, our inches are 1 inch bigger, it's not going to work. So everybody's kind of said, an inch is an inch, and it's got to be within a certain tolerance of size. And then the way to check it is other people are using centimeters, and so you check. If all that was erased one day and it was just removed from society, we'd have to rebuild, and we have to come up with a new measurement system. at first they would be decentralized measuring systems. You would have somebody building a house in one part of the world and another part of the world, and they would have measuring implements, and they might not be standardized between the two individuals. The instruments would be different, and you'd be taking a different piece, and that would still be called one unit of measurement. But physics would still apply whether or not they wanted it to or not, and they would still need to count the units in a universal measure of 1, 2, 3, 4. But they could name them anything else that they wanted to. One, you could name one could be called 2, technically, but it would still have to be attached to a real thing. And the only difference is you would say, if 2 and 1 swapped, you would say 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. But that would not mean that a unit of 2 is more than 1. It would now mean that a unit of 2 was the original unit, and 1 unit would be 2 plus 2 equals 1. So the language is important to convey this to people, and I'm hoping I didn't confuse anybody there. But it still has to be attached to reality. So when they're saying nowadays in schools, they're trying to teach people, like in Orwell's, that 2 plus 2 equals 5, let's say. And they're like, could 2 plus 2 equal 5? And everybody's like, no. It's like, well, yes, 2 plus 2 could equal 5 because they're just words. As long as 2, whatever 2 represented, and then whatever 5 represented, that 2 is half of 5. So if you say 2 plus 2 equals 5, then a unit of 2 would be, the word 2 would have to mean 2.5 units of something else, but then the word 2 would have to mean something different. Does that make sense? So they can say whatever they want, but in reality, maybe I should do this video with a board, because it would be easier to visualize matching these things up. The word is just a placeholder for something in reality. So, 1 plus 1 equals 2. We're saying those words because it's easier to convey the idea. But it's just unit. If you take a unit and put another unit next to it, and then combine these two units into a concept that's valid, there's a unit and a unit, and we call those 2 units, well, a unit and a unit, 2. And so you could call this, instead of this saying 1 unit, you could call it 2 unit. You could call this 2 unit. And then you could say 2 unit plus 2 unit equals 7 units. But then you'd have to change the terminology of 1 to mean 2. And 2, which is in reality here, would just be named 7. So all they're really doing is saying, oh, we could change the language. And it's like, no shit, Sherlock. You change it every day. Like, there's so many words that used to mean one thing and you're changing it. They do this bullshit all the time. It just frustrates me. And then a couple years later, they change it in Webster, and then it's like Mandela effect. They pretend like the other thing never existed. But I come from a time where, like, the word racism was a science term, but now they're like, it's a negative term that means bigotry. And so then people are like, okay. And then discriminate didn't have a connotation before. Now it's got a connotation. And it's like, people discriminate all the time. It's not necessarily a negative thing. It's like, you're watching this video right now with my nipple in it, and you're discriminating against all other videos that don't have my nipple in it right now. So good or bad, that's discrimination. When people get married or they're in a monogamous relationship, they're discriminating against everybody else. Having a prejudice, it's like prejudice is just simply well, it's negative to have a prejudice. It's like, is it? Like, everybody that screams at me in the past has not really been a good person. I've built a prejudice up against people that scream at me. So when I first encounter somebody that's screaming at me, my first initial thought is, okay, this is not a good person. And then I can dissect and treat them as an individual after that. Oh, they're screaming, there's a fire, run away, or there's an active shooter, or watch out, there's a, giant fat person eating things over there. Whatever they're screaming. Insert better joke than I just made here, and then laugh at it. But these words aren't interchangeable. They mean very specific things, and if they try to control the language, they'll control all this. And it just reminds me of, like, I forget her name, the woman that escaped from North Korea. Ying, I don't know her name, but there's a woman and she talks about how there's no word for freedom, there's no word for liberty. And so people don't even recognize what it is because there's no way to communicate it with one another. So I guess going full circle back to the decentralization of stuff, I actually don't have a problem with more words being created if it allows people to have more ways to communicate with one another. But what I would be worried about is, as language becomes decentralized, as language becomes centralized instead of decentralized, they start controlling and weaponizing these words, and taking away their meaning. Even I was on Twitter yesterday, and I was just made a joke about how women claim that body count doesn't matter, and then they call men incels, and that an incel is somebody who's involuntarily celibate, so they involuntarily have a low body count. And then the woman responded, "That's not what an incel is," and she went on wrote this big paragraph about how it's misogyny and all this stuff, and it's a community of misogynists online that are mean to women. And you're like, oh, so the word literally "in" stands for involuntary, and "cel" means celibacy, but now they've created this whole huge definition based on their thing. And I was just like, it's not to get off topic, but there's a connotation and a denotation to every word. So, like, the denotation of incel is "in" stands for involuntary, and "cel" stands for celibate. Just like anarchy is "and" stands with or no. Anarchias is like rules. So anarchy is without rulers, or without rules, or rules without rulers. But when people hear the word, there's a connotation for some people. And so you're speaking two languages. You're saying a magic word that creates a chemical reaction of emotion with them. So you say incel, and they hear mean men online that yell at me and make me feel uncomfortable because they're misogynist and all this stuff. And then, like, not only that, is the definition that they had another bunch of buzzwords in it. And then if you pull the buzzwords apart and try to dissect them, they don't mean what they mean. I really do like a lot of the English words that are breakdowns of Latin and Greek words. And English is really clunky. I can see why people have a hard time understanding the English. I really should fully learn Greek because of my ancestry, but also just it's a really good language how they break words down and build words up. So, like, philo is love, but there's like, 9 different words for love. Philo is the a common word for not like non-romantic love, so philo. And then wisdom, which is Sophia, so or truth. It's kind of like a truth wisdom. So the word means philosophia, like love of wisdom. Um, and that just makes it a lot easier to kind of break down and understand words, because if you understand a list of like root words, then you can kind of create words putting those two words together. Whereas if you just when you just create these new words for everything and there's no attachment, there's no growth within the language and there's no connection between the language, and then the precision is lost. You could take a bunch of love pretexts in English and in Greek, and then take a bunch of other root parts of it and create all these things like, so you have like philosophy is the love of Sophia, wisdom, truth, and then you have philanthropy. Thropy is like mankind, so you have the love of mankind or humans, or like community. I don't know. I think it would make it a lot easier. I guess I'm getting off track here, but time to get moving. But life is definitely pretty cool right now. It's interesting. If you have some time today, maybe sit down and just think about decentralized language, how it comes into existence, how we share it with one another, how it communicates the denotation, the actual substance of reality, how connotation, the emotional implied in some cases, but the emotional reaction / implied part of that word gets attached to it, and then people run with that. And then when you're communicating back and forth with people, you can have a very neutral, pragmatic thing where you're saying, well, I mean, you gotta feel for the guy, he's in incel, and you're like, don't you have any empathy for this person? They're involuntarily celibate, but the other person hears, well, you have to feel for this guy because he hates women and he's mean and he's online, and they have all this emotional stuff that they think that word implies. It's untouched, and so that's what they hear. The chemicals go off, the prefrontal cortex gets shut down, the conversation isn't even there. You are speaking two different languages. I'm not saying that anybody, including anybody with guns or the government, should step in to, sort this stuff out and standardize the thing. We've seen it. It's the exact opposite that what happens with propaganda is they start weaponizing words. But it's something to think about throughout the day. And then it's also, the last thing I leave is just like in Mean Girls, when like, stop trying to make fetch work. So like there's certain words and stuff that people try to make get into the zeitgeist of the fabric of the vernacular, and people just don't catch on. And then there's other ones that catch on. And then it's funny because other ones catch on, and then when certain people start saying it, the other people are like, okay, I don't want to say that anymore. Like when you hear like somebody like my age start using the word lit. Young kids are like, all right, I'm done. Lit's not cool anymore. But it's weird because cool's a really old one, and it's gone back and forth where people didn't like it, they liked it, they didn't like it, and now it's kind of just in the everyday talk. So all right, time for me to go get pretty and go out into the world. So I just wanted to make this very authentic video with me and my dirty beard, my bed, my dirty bed, and my sleep nose spacer for sleeping, and my mask for meditation.